All right, so there we go. All right, so welcome everyone to the second Alumni Speak of this year. Today we'll be talking with two social workers who are currently working in police departments. We'll start by introducing Meg Crace, who is a social worker for the Carpentersville Police Department. Meg received her undergraduate degree from Western Illinois University with a double major in law enforcement, justice administration, and Spanish. Meg then attended Loyola University, where she graduated with her master's in social work. Meg has been with the Carpentersville Police Department since 2019. Prior to working at Carpentersville, she worked for the McHenry County Childhood Advocacy Center, McHenry County State's Attorney, and McHenry County Adult Protective Services. Meg is currently the only social worker at Carpentersville Police Department, and she is partnered with her canine, Walter, who is a therapy canine. So welcome, Meg. And Jamie Horner graduated from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in psychology. Following graduation, she transitioned to Loyola Chicago to complete her master's in social work with a focus on drug and alcohol treatment. With this degree, Jamie was able to become a certified alcohol and other drug abuse counselor and a licensed clinical social worker. She is also a certified domestic violence professional and certified clinical trauma professional. Jamie's interests include client-centered treatment with mental health, substance abuse, or dually diagnosed clients. She also enjoys assisting individuals and families through their grief experiences as a certified grief-informed professional. Jamie prides herself on being a strong client advocate who fights to diminish the stigma of mental health and addiction and increase client sense of empowerment. So thank you, Jamie, for also joining us tonight. So we'll start off with Meg, if you want to go ahead and talk about how did you decide on working within a police department?
Sure. So like you said, my undergraduate degree is in law enforcement. So growing up, I thought I was going to be a police officer. That was the whole dream. That was everything I wanted. And then I did my internship with the McHenry County Sheriff's Office, and really kind of got into the police work and decided that I wanted to be able to do more, that police are very limited in what they can do. So I wanted to be able to do more. So that's when I decided to go back to school and get my MSW. But I always knew I wanted to blend law enforcement and Spanish because law enforcement was still a passion of mine. The court system was still a passion of mine. So that's when I started sort of working in the field and around the legal system and the law and trying to get to know everything I could so that I could eventually combine those. So, I apologize, my computer's rocking because my dog is not listening right now.
No, you're good. I think we've seen kind of the increasing need for bilingual social workers and the importance of that. So that's really great that you're able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then Jamie, how about you? How did you decide on specifically within the police department, or was it a journey to kind of get to that point?
Yeah, my story isn't as I don't know, fueled by passion to get into the position I'm in as Meg. Not to say I absolutely love this job and it's completely my dream now that I'm here, but I really didn't know what I wanted to focus in. I did a lot with addictions, worked in rehabilitation, and I liked it. I liked fast pace. I liked being challenged. I liked something new happening every day. But I needed more. I needed something more. And so when Naperville posted their job, I'm like, this sounds really interesting. And it actually fit, my personality and my desires in my career to a T. And it honestly worked out. Very, very thankful. I know it's a tough field to get into. So I don't know how I got to this point, but I am not going to question it or look back because I am just thrilled that I am. So yeah, so it kind of just by happenstance, I'm in this field.
And so I will start with Jamie for this one, but what were your internship experiences? I know you mentioned that you were in substance use specifically. So was that kind of what you were in, or what did that look like for you? And then how did they aid in your decision or make you feel confident that you could go into the profession of social work within policing?
Yeah, so my undergrad actually did an internship working with survivors of domestic violence. So I was working with them. It was part of our undergrad program. And then as in my master's, I internship for a transitional housing program called Bridge Communities, which is in DuPage County. And that was at that time, I don't know if Loyola still does this, but at that time they tried to pair you with an internship, your first internship that isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse or isn't like what you really are looking to do. And I ended up loving it. It was like a family. I learned a lot about people's socioeconomic statuses and the challenges of that, and the challenges of risk of being homeless and then getting out of homelessness, and because it's just such a significant battle that people have to go through. And so ended up becoming like a family with them. Actually, one of my supervisors ended up, he was a deacon, married my husband and I. So just really beautiful relationship. And I work with them now that I'm in DuPage County. But again, like I said, that wasn't necessarily the passion that I had. So I wanted to work with dually diagnosed clients with severe mental illness. And so my second internship in my master's program was at Elgin Mental Health Center. I worked in their forensic unit, so they're not guilty by reason of insanity unit. So as you can imagine, it's individuals who committed pretty heinous crimes, not pretty heinous crimes, fueled mostly by their mental health and addiction. So I really enjoyed kind of working with a more I don't know what the word is, but a high risk population like that. It was really very, very interesting to me, very interesting to kind of hear how that system worked. And then from there, I ended up going into rehab. So, and I had a lot of clients there that had a lot of legal issues as well. And so I was very familiar with the legal side of things, not necessarily the police side of things, but the legal side, and trying to empower, our clients' rights, even when they are, a client with significant needs and maybe isn't seen as the same standing as other residents in the community, and how to make sure their rights are being heard and that they're being heard. So that kind of is what led to that. So between domestic violence, homelessness, severe mentally ill, and then substance use, I use all of those in my practice now, on along with other things, but just tried to get a wide variety of populations to work with. So I have multiple skill sets in my career now.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say, to your Loyola does try to push you to get out of your comfort zone in that first internship. And so that is really important. But it definitely sounds like all those experiences led up to your confidence in your role now, which is really important as well. And I think with social work, we can implement so many different things into our field that we can draw from different experiences, even if they don't directly translate, which is the beauty of the profession itself. So Meg, how about you, Meg? What were your internship experiences, and then how did they aid you in your decision? You kind of already knew you wanted to go into policing, but how did it kind of confirm that for you?
Sure. So this will probably be one of the least popular things I'll say. I never wanted to be a clinician. That was never something I went into social work to want to do. So I did not do a clinical internship at all. So my first internship was with a youth center down in Bronzeville in Chicago, doing a mentoring program. We had two. We had a mentoring program for kids trying to get into college, but then we also had a mentoring program for kids who had incarcerated parents, and working with them. So that was my first internship. And then my second internship was out in McHenry County, which everything in my career revolves around McHenry County. I'm not actually from McHenry County. I'm from Chicago. So it was a big culture shock for me. But my second internship was up in McHenry County with DCFS. So I went in and spent a rotation working with investigations with intact families at the time, and then placement. So that really gave me my first sort of hands-on experience working with DCFS. I spent a lot of time in the Child Advocacy Center watching interviews of kids who'd been abused, and then watching them go to court, whether it was in the juvenile abuse neglect case, or even we went to some criminal trials. I had the opportunity to testify. So, so it was a great experience for me to be able to see all of those different things and how the system sort of works together, because I was part of that multidisciplinary team at the Child Advocacy Center to be able to see all the case and see how it worked with the different parts. So I think that so I know we're going to probably talk about later what our job functions are, but that's some of the big differences between Jamie and I. I don't do clinical work. I still don't. I do a little bit now because I'm working on getting my clinical license, but I don't like it and I don't want to. So that it's not a big part of what I do. So I didn't have that internship experience, but it's worked out.
I think you're not alone in that. We do have like our macro level people who are more into that. And then we also have a lot of people who are more like resource referral coordination. And that's always something that I've been really passionate about, and going into schools is something that I love about that aspect of it. So it might be controversial, but I totally hear you on that, because I also love that aspect of social work. It's not just clinician-based therapy, there's so much more to the role. So and then, as you mentioned, we were going to get into, so what are the main roles that you serve within your police department? I know it looks very different across the country and even across police departments. So we'll go Meg first this time. So Carpentersville, what does that look like for you?
Sure. So like I said, I don't do any counseling. I'm the only social worker. Carpentersville has about 40,000 people in it. So we have had a social worker for about 30 years. So there was somebody, it was one other person and then myself. So what I do sort of my daily is I come in every morning and I review all police reports to sort of assess them and see what I can pull out that I might be able to reach out to somebody and give them a resource or a referral on. So I work with that. I also work with our, as you probably can hear him whining, I have my therapy canine, who is a handful at times when we're at home. But so I do a lot of work with him, and I think we're going to talk about him a little bit later, but so I do a lot of community engagement. So I plan a lot of events, from National Night Out, which is a night for everybody to get out of their house in the summers and try and make a sense of community and a sense of camaraderie around the country. So I do a lot of planning for that. I also do our peer support program. I do our officer wellness program. I sort of spearhead all community engagement. I do our social media for the department. I'm in charge of our Narcan supply and giving it to the officers. So I do a lot of sort of random things around the department that add up, but my bread and butter is that I do the assessment referral. I'm also a certified forensic interviewer. So I will do forensic interviews of children when cases don't go to our Child Advocacy Center. So I'll interview kids. They'll call me in when they have a child victim to try and help with anxiety and different referrals and things like that. So kind of just all over the place, wherever people think that I'd be helpful is kind of what I do.
That's cool. I think also you hit like a meso level, which we don't always talk about a ton, but like the community engagement is such an important piece of it. And so that's really interesting that you get to do a lot of that as well, especially within policing. We'll talk a little bit about like your role within the police department a little bit more towards like the community, but I think that's really important as well, that you build that connection. So Jamie, you're in Naperville, which is a big suburb of Chicago. So how does your role look today?
Yeah, so to piggyback off of kind of what Meg said, police social work, and what you said earlier too, Claire, police social work does look a bit different in different departments. But if you're seeking out social work that is very clinical based, this is not the field for you. It's very rare to come across a police social work program that specializes in counseling. And so I'll kind of talk about mine is very similar to Meg of initial assessment and referral. So we are a little bit more hands-on, I think, with our clients in the sense of in the moment engaged, where I know Meg, you have your case, you review cases and then follow up after the fact, which we do. We definitely do that. I have a very significant caseload right now. But we do crisis intervention here. So we pair up with officers and go to scenes, 911 calls, and respond in the moment to provide that in-person assessment and crisis intervention. So Naperville is very much kind of pushing that forward of the immediate crisis intervention. And then again, like I said, the follow-up, it's a lot of case management. So typically it's a couple times communicating with someone to get them connected to our resource-rich area, which is so nice. So other parts that are real significant with my job is kind of finding the trends that's going on in our town and trying to find some prevention intervention services if we can. So Meg, mentioned Narcan. So we do substance use referral program here. I work a lot with the schools to be able to do substance use prevention. We do suicide prevention, just really anything, like that you can think of. And we work very closely with our local schools and agencies to do so. We also have an officer wellness program or peer support program that I'm very involved with. And then, we all there's 4 of us here have specialties. And so we do break off a little bit into what those specialties are. And so we have a victim advocate that works primarily with like domestic violence and sexual assault. So she does a lot of times like working with the court systems and trying to get orders of protection or no contact orders, safety planning with people who need that. I work primarily with substance use, severely mentally ill, and then I specialize a lot in grief. So when we have traumatic grief or traumatic death, I work very closely with that. Another clinician was really engaged with families, really like family intervention. So being able to help with that juvenile justice piece is a part of our role within our department. They're actually working on creating a way to actually work with the detective and the families and the youth to be able to kind of do a diversion from court. So some departments do that already. We're looking to implement that. And then another one of our clinician works a lot with like the elderly and intellectually disabled individuals. And so we all kind of have our bread and butter, but we all do it all. It's very much what Meg said before of wherever you think we can help is where we help. So there's things, some days I'm like, I can't believe this is my job. But we do what we can to best provide services to our community, to our residents, visitors, and to our officers. So every day looks different, but it's an exciting career.
Definitely sounds like it is. And it's nice that you're not in like one niche the whole time. You really get to engage so many different aspects of your of social work and your schooling and all that different stuff. So speaking of schooling and your education, how did your education, we'll start with Meg, not only in social work, but also the law enforcement, justice administration, and then Spanish as well. How did those all impact and develop you as a police social worker?
So I would say probably my biggest is my Spanish. Carpentersville is 68% Hispanic. So I would not be able to function in my role if I wasn't bilingual. It just wouldn't work. So that was a huge part for me in Carpentersville specifically. For me, probably the biggest thing that I use is my knowledge of the legal justice system. As Jamie said, it's that advocacy work. I can explain a court case from the second a crime happens till the end, which most people don't know. My average criminal case takes about 2.5 years. And I can explain that in 2 languages. So that's a very important part to how I function. And I would say for social work specifically, I don't use like the sort of hard social work skills that you're taught but more just the different ways of communicating, the ways to switch up your questions to fit different levels, the way to talk to people depending on what level of functionality they're at, and recognizing it and sort of seeing where they're at. It also really comes in handy when you're trying to make those referrals to make I get very small tidbits of information from people and then have to make an appropriate referral based on that. So that education on how to pick apart those 3 sentences you get into making it an effective referral is sort of the big part of my education that I use, and probably a ton of other stuff that I don't know that came from my education, but mostly just that way to talk to people with respect and dignity and everything else.
Yeah, it sounds like that quick rapport building is really, really important for your role. How about you, Jamie? How has your education impacted that? And then interestingly, I didn't even think about, Meg, that like understanding of the legal system, which is very extensive and confusing. So you did not do law enforcement. So how did you get to know how did that process look for you, trying to understand the whole legal system?
Yeah, so I will say I loved my graduate program, and I learned a ton. But the direct question of like, how did my education prepare me for police social work? It did not. And I'm saying that in the sense of the core, right? The core parts of being a social worker, the how to talk to people, different therapeutic techniques, different assessment techniques, being able to learn about advocacy, policy, legislation, things like that. Those were all huge skills that I still use to this day that I attribute to my education. Police social work, though, is very much in-person application of like crisis intervention skills, which is very, even if you take a crisis intervention course, which I don't think was offered when I was there, I don't remember that, but like a crisis intervention course, there's so many layers to crisis intervention that it's very much experience based, and tapping into other people's knowledge base. So my education was a lot of in the field application. I was very lucky that my internships at my supervisors were extremely knowledgeable and had extensive background, so they knew kind of what was important to teach me. So like that it was important to teach me how to fill out an involuntary petition for hospitalization, to be able to do a suicide assessment, to be able to do crisis assessment at the moment. Like those things, it's very difficult to learn out of a book in a classroom. The big, I would say the big things that I value from my education is that drive for passion. So if you looked at my transcripts, my classes were all over the place. I did social work on the law. I did child therapy. I did a lot of policy stuff, just like there wasn't a one track. I did obviously substance use. There wasn't a one track thing for me because I liked all of it. And what my professors and everyone was saying is continue to explore your curiosity and what you're interested in. My grandpa was a social worker he was in Iowa, for what, our DCFS would be. And he's like, you're going to want to 100% work with children. That's going to be your passion. That is not my passion. I appreciate what he said, but he said, you will find your passion. You will find what you want. And so being able to get the education and support to be able to continue to explore, ask questions, learn, and fuel that energy was the biggest thing I took from my education, is to never stop learning. So even though, I had a lot of years in school, it's what I did after that to continue to challenge myself. So I know that's probably not the best answer for Loyola, but they did a great job, I think, with trying to develop me as a whole person first, and then put me out into the field to find my niche.
I think that's a really great point of that. You never stop learning, especially in the field. I feel like that's where so much of our learning comes from. And a lot of our classes are like, obviously understanding theories, but application of what you learned in field to those theories or whatever it is. And we do have a crisis intervention course now, which I did take, and it was super helpful, but also the first time I had a crisis, like at the school I'm at, I was like, oh my God, like, wait, what do I do? So you have to take that step back and really go through, like, process with your supervisor and do all that to really get it. Because you see it in a PowerPoint and you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then you're like, wait a second. So I definitely hear you on that.
Yeah.
And I really quickly want to mention this as someone, because I also, you know, I'm an adjunct professor at Aurora. And so as a teacher now, as someone in the field, and then someone who obviously went to Loyola, I want to say, like, anyone who says they're an expert in the field really bothers me, because nobody is. You're never going to be an expert. You can be very, very smart and very, very proficient in a part of social work, but there's always room to learn and always room to grow. So that's one thing that I think my education as well taught me, is the fact of if you remain stagnant in your learning and stagnant in your field, you are not succeeding. You are doing something wrong. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I just mean that things, you know, theories from people don't follow Freud like they used to, right? For a reason. Things change, things advance. And so, you know, make sure to utilize any opportunity you can, ask questions whenever you can. There is no such thing as a stupid question. If I would have known that the day I graduated, I would have probably done so much better in the beginning, because I wouldn't have been scared to ask for help. So know that the people around you, the social workers around you, and I don't mean to go in a soapbox, but the people around you want you to succeed in this career. And so they're going to help you do so, but they don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, right? Until you say, I don't know what this is. And so continuing to challenge yourself and continuing to advance your skill set is a huge part of education, and it'll happen for hopefully the rest of our lives, rest of my life. I'm going to keep going.
And I also want to add, Jamie and I are very lucky that, so police social work, contrary to what people think, is not actually a new field. Jamie and I are both on the board for the Association of Police Social Services. And we have people in our organization who've been doing this for 30 years. My department has had a social worker for over 30 years. So this is not a new field by any stretch. And we are very lucky to have a core group of people who can come together and learn from each other and keep growing, because even if you've been in the field for 30 years, somebody may come in and start a different program and it's really cool and effective and you want to take it and borrow it. And we're very lucky that we have this network of support of great minds, of people who are starting out and people who've been doing it for 30 years, and this big mix, because it's not a new field, and it's fantastic to be able to relate to and coordinate with all these other people. So the education really doesn't stop. It may stop out of a book, but it doesn't stop in what you learn from people. Because I probably learn, again, things I shouldn't admit, way more from people that I meet on the street doing my everyday job than I did ever in school, because they're the ones who teach me how to relate to people. They're the ones who taught me how to have these hard conversations and how to relate to people and how to meet people where they are. I can preach it till the day I die that you need to meet people where you are, but until you have to do it, you don't know. So it's really effective, and it's great to get that big group of people and that bonding within the profession, and it's there. People do want to help.
Yeah, definitely. And one of my professors said, find your people after graduation who you can consult with, and, you know, do whatever you need to do to be present in your job. And so I think that's something that I'll carry with me. And I feel like has been, you both have like assured that notion that, you know, having your people that you can discuss with and learn from and grow with is super important, alongside the clients that you interact with every day. So I appreciate that. And obviously, like, this is for school, but they always promote to the importance of field and the application. And so I think you're just reassuring that point that field is so important to the piece, and then once you get into the actual profession, you're not starting off with just theory, you know, you have some experience. You're still going to learn a lot as you go, but you have some experience to build off of. So I guess moving to the next kind of question here. So this one's specifically for Jamie. You've talked about, you know, the CADC training, which is the Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor, and then domestic violence experience as well. So how has those specific trainings helped you in your current role? And then would you recommend students follow those tracks, go through those trainings? I know we also have some other substance use trainings, specifically with opioids and different things like that. So what have you seen and how have they helped you?
Yeah, so great question. So I have on top of my LCSW, a lot of letters behind my name, which they are what they are. But my CADC, my CDVP, which is Certified Domestic Violence Professional, are two big ones. And then I'm also a certified trauma clinician, and then a grief informed specialist. So what all those fancy things mean is that I just got extra education in those fields. So the thing is that the only, and I want to say this because I don't want people to be like, I can't wait to get all these letters behind my name. It just happened so that I am doing these things, but the main letters that are most important is LCSW, because with LCSW, you get to do any and all of it, right? That's like your free pass. That's your golden ticket. And then from there is what you want to specialize in. Now, with my career now, I didn't realize some of the specialties that would be really helpful. So about grief, about trauma are huge, domestic violence, and then substance use affects literally everybody. Every case, if you think of like, oh, I really like to work with kids and families, or I like to work in a school, you're going to see a lot of issues with substance use in the school. You know, or I want to work with the seniors. The senior females are the largest growing population of individuals that abuse substances. So it's, you know, it really, all of these specialties kind of impact each other, and you're going to learn that. And then you're going to say, what do I need to learn more to be more successful? And so I will say the number one thing that I will recommend and that people have said to me is the CADC, just because substance use literally affects every part of social work. So homelessness, mental health, domestic violence, sexual assault, like I said, seniors, families, it really does. So a lot of people say, I wish I would have got that. But my thing is that it helped me quite a bit. And I got my CADC in conjunction with my MSW, which I really enjoyed. But my other trainings, I let myself become more knowledgeable in the field before I challenged myself to gain more knowledge. And I say that because I think I would have been too overwhelmed to really take in those specialties at a younger age and younger in my career. Whereas now I'm able to kind of explore the ideas and explore the therapies deeper and know how to apply them better. So for example, I just so my grief informed specialist is going to be changing to certified compassionate bereavement counselor, and I just did a 4-day training to be able to get to that point, and it was very intensive. And I don't think I would have been able to really appreciate that without having these specific cases I can think in my mind of when I would have needed it, right? Like when I would have really needed this training, a lot of the traumatic deaths that I've been involved with. And so specializations are fantastic. If you want to be in the schools, obviously you have to do special schooling for that and things like that. So go down those paths, but all the extra letters, let them come to you. That's my opinion. Let them come to you. Let them kind of speak to you, because you're going to find out what you want to be passionate about, what you want to learn, and how far you'll go to do that. So I know that that's probably not the answer. That's not really the question that you asked. But the thing is that it goes back to what we said before of education never stops. So when I realized that there's certain gaps in my knowledge base, took it upon myself, because it's my responsibility. It's not anyone else's responsibility to fill those gaps. Took it upon myself to ask more questions and explore more, because to be able to be the best provider I can to clients, I have to continue to work on me as a provider. They can't adapt to me. I have to adapt to them. So that's, they've been really helpful. A lot of trainings you're going to find in the future, they're going to be really helpful, but it's a lot of going back to the basics of how to talk to people, how to care for people and care about people, and then respond from there. So, like I said, kind of let your path start, and then you'll guide your way into where you want to specialize with some experience. So that's just a personal opinion of mine.
No, I really appreciate that answer, because I think there's a lot of pressure when you see all those acronyms and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I need all these things to build my resume and do all this stuff. But the reality is, like you said before, you don't know what you don't know until you get into the field in a lot of cases. And so this is like a prime example of that. And another question, just to build off this really quick, is have you been utilizing your CEU time to explore different things? And Meg, you can speak to this too, just to continue that
Yes.
process.
Yeah, I encourage you to view CEUs not as a pain, but as an opportunity, because that's exactly, I got CEUs for these last 4 days that I've been in training, which is an added bonus. It wasn't necessarily why I chose to do this training. Actually, it wasn't why I chose to do it, but it's an added bonus. And I think that's what the NASW wants to push, is the fact of, one, we don't want stagnant therapists. We don't want stagnant social workers. We don't want people not advancing, but also that opportunity to explore other things as needed. So, and again, if we only had school, right? If we only had the education, and I graduated in 2013 and that was it, I would never have been able to understand how, and this is my tangent, but how beautiful the grief cycle is, and how beautiful it is to help someone through grief. Because back at that time, I would have been like, absolutely not. I'm not going to work with someone through that. I don't want to do bereavement. It's too sad. It's too hard. Whereas now my respect and understanding of it is completely different because of my experience. And so being able to utilize my CEU times to be able to explore that passion, it's just been a really beautiful thing. And I'm very grateful for that. And so, instead of looking at, and I understand there's some trainings you're going to go through and be like, this isn't the best thing I've ever been to. But keep an open mind and keep an open heart, and use that time to explore who you are as a clinician and what you want out of your career. Because that's exactly what it's there for. It's exactly what you're supposed to do. And that's why I think the NASW really pushes for that as well.
I'd agree with what Jamie said. So I'm certified in domestic violence and I'm certified in sex assault. And it's all been through opportunities that we've been given and being able to explore these different things. So I've also been able to sort of explore things like, as I said before, I am going now to get my C for my license. It was never anything I wanted before. I knew I didn't want to be a clinician and all of that. So I have not worked any sort of typical social worker jobs where I would have been able to have the access to the supervision through my license or through my day-to-day employment. So I am now working with another police social worker who's providing me the supervision for my license, because I think while I still don't plan on doing clinical work, I think it's going to be important for me in the future, come supervisory roles, different things like that. As social work changes, I think it's going to become more and more important. So I am working towards that, even though it makes me uncomfortable. And even though it's not my favorite thing to do, it's still something I need to do to grow for myself and to grow for the program that I want to have in the way that I want to serve my community. So that growth is very important, but it does take time. I mean, I've been out of school for 11 years. I would recommend, if you do have a job where you can get your supervision hours, just do it right away, because now studying for that test is 10 times harder because I've been out of school for 10 years and don't know what the theories are anymore because you don't use them in your everyday practice. So, or at least you don't think of them by name. So I do suggest that if you are going to do it, do the supervision right away, save yourself some heartache, because I'm going to spend the next year. So I have a little bit less than a year left of supervision. I'm going to spend a lot of that studying.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice. Just get her done in a lot of ways. And like you said, it does open a lot of different opportunities as well, moving forward, whether it's supervisory roles or different job positions that you didn't think were available to you. So Meg, as we know, you have a doggo, a sweet doggo who's your canine therapy dog. So how did you get involved with canine therapy, just to start off?
Sure. So I had my first therapy canine when I was at the McHenry County Child Advocacy Center. So if you don't know what the Child Advocacy Center does, is the Child Advocacy Center sort of serves as a hub. It can look different in every county. For McHenry County, they're their own nonprofit, and they serve as a hub for law enforcement and DCFS and the state's attorney's office together. And the Child Advocacy Center has staff who performs what we call forensic interviews on children, which is just a child appropriate conversation about something traumatic that's happened. So I was working there as the legal medical advocate. And so legal medical family advocate. So while an interview was being done on a child, I would work with the parents to set up the next steps in terms of if a medical exam was needed, if they needed any counseling, any referrals, things like that. I'd go along to any medical exams, and then I'd go to court with them for whatever they were going for, whether it was an order of protection or the whole 2.5-year court process, and explain to them what was going on as it was going. So we had at the Child Advocacy Center, we had Apple. So she was a golden retriever trained through Duo in St. Louis, who came to us. She was born and raised and bred to be a facility dog, is what they call them. So she would be able to go into the interview with the kid. She and I would meet the child when they came in. So the Child Advocacy Center is generally set up like a house to make it more comfortable. So they walk into a living room, there's a whole couch, there's toys everywhere, books, TV, all the fun stuff where they can come in and kind of settle and get used to things before they're then taken back for the interview. So Apple and I would do that part with the family. And then Apple was able to go in and sit on the couch next to a child while they just had made their disclosure and had their interview, and then would come out after with them as well. So that really started it. Apple and I were also certified to go to court. So in the state of Illinois, if in a criminal case, there's an allegation from a child, the child does have to testify if the case goes to trial. Now, I don't know the exact statistic, but I'd say 97% of cases don't actually go to trial. But if they do go to trial, the child does have to testify. And so Apple was certified to sit in the witness box with kids while they testified to try and provide some support. So I loved it. I loved how much I could see the impact on the children. So then when I left the Child Advocacy Center and I started up at Carpentersville, I was there for probably 2 years before I approached my chief. We gotten a new chief in. He started last May, and sort of in June, we were sitting down, and he had never worked at a police department with a social worker before. So we had this long meeting where I basically sat down. I was like, hey, I don't think you know what I do. Let's sit down and talk about it. So we went through everything that I do, and then I gave him sort of my wish list, because my whole theory on it was, I'm going to ask you, and this way, if you say no, it's your fault. You said no, and it's not my fault because I didn't ask. So I'm all about blaming other people. It's fine. So we sat down, and I gave him sort of my 10-year wish list. And he said, no, this is great. Let's do it all now. And so on that was getting a dog. So we went through and we got Walter. Walter is from Paws and Stripes College in Brevard County, Florida. Paws and Stripes is a program through the sheriff's office where they take dogs that come into animal control who are rescue animals, and they give them to inmates and have inmates train them along with a specialized handler for law enforcement. So they're either given to law enforcement to be therapy canines, or they're given to veterans as service or as emotional support animals if they're not fit for law enforcement. So I went down, 'm, 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 So Walter and I are together 24/7. I actually a few minutes ago let him back out into my house because we are home. So he thinks it's time to play. I can hear him chasing my children around. So he is very much has a work personality and a home personality. So, but he is fantastic. I take him with me everywhere I go at work. So I know 2 days this week I'm going into schools. So he'll come around with me and we'll use him to go into the class and see the kids. But also when I'm in there, I do a whole spiel. I have an officer who comes with me and we go through how officers can look really intimidating and they can look really scary, but let's look at what they look like and talk about some of the stuff that they have on them to make it less scary. So we go through, what do we use a radio for? What is dispatch? What happens when you call 911? What are all the different things that they carry used for and why do they have them? So Walter comes with for all of that and he's just sort of the fun part. We do canine demos all the time. So we're lucky enough that we have 2 canines. We have Walter and then we have what we call an apprehension canine who is trained in 9 different things from drugs, handler protection, cadavers, all sorts of different things. So then Walter and Blitz will go out and do demos together. So Walter does that. Walter is also there for the officers. So pretty much at all times you will find somebody in my office. And it's just sort of a stress release. And then also as the social worker gets them into my office so that I can sink my claws into them. So that's another added bonus of Walter. But I've used him when we have kids in the station whose parents are being interviewed for being victims of crime. I had recently a domestic case where mom was being interviewed. So I had the 2 kids that I was talking to while mom was being interviewed, so they didn't have to be in the room, and Walter was able to be there with them. So Walter will eventually get to the point where he's doing interviews with me. We're not there yet. He goes before and after, but right now we're not there yet because he is part of the beginning when you get a dog is they have to bond so much to you that right now, if we're in an interview, he wants to sit next to me and not the other person. So it's a training. We're working on this training. So, but he'll eventually do that. He is currently certified to do courtroom, but we're not doing it yet. We'll get there, but we're sort of slowly moving forward. So I went through a transition in my position in January. So 2 years ago, we had an officer who did community engagement and crime prevention who got promoted. And because of the pandemic, they did not fill the position because we weren't doing much community engagement at that point. We have now filled that position. So some of those duties of mine are getting transferred to another person to free up my time to go back to doing more interviews and more social work. So, but he stays with me. He's my dog. But he's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And it's not only fun, but it sounds like it definitely impacts and benefits the people that you work with and the officers and, those who are coming in for various reasons. I had seen, I think the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center also has a program for canine therapy. So that's really cool. So we have about 8-9 minutes here. So I wanted to get to this big question towards the end here, but do you feel like your role within the police department is valued and growing with the rise in social unrest regarding police violence that we've seen? I mean, it's been years, but really that's come to fruition in the past few years here. Who's ready to answer that? I should ask first.
I could go either way. Do you want to go, Jamie? Okay. I will say for me, I love my department. I am incredibly spoiled. My officers are fantastic to me. I'm absolutely valued within my department. The officers love having a social work program. I am incredibly spoiled. So I do think that social work in police departments will grow, but not the way it shows on media. But I do think that police departments see the value in it. You're seeing a lot more departments go forward with it because you're seeing these departments who've had social workers for 30 years and the benefits of it. And so I know I've had nothing but great experiences in my department. I don't think we have changed anything really than how we were doing it before, but I do think that it is valued, and I just think that some of us were kind of doing stuff all along, and so just other places are kind of catching up.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to echo what Meg said, and I'm going to kind of dive into some of the more political stuff probably, but I'll be brief though. So my department is my family. I mean, not just figuratively, but literally. I work alongside with my older brother, who's one of my heroes for sure. But you know, I love a lot of my officers as family members and friends, and they love me. And so that is something that is a beautiful relationship, but that takes time, right? So it takes time to build that up. So what I'm going to say in regards to, do I feel valued? I do in my department and in my community, from those who understand who I am and what I do. If you do not understand who I am or what I do, I fully expect you to be hesitant of me and my role, because there's a lot of unfortunate distrust right now with first responders as well as with social work. Unfortunately, people get jaded, people get you know, bad taste in their mouth, or you know, and it starts to kind of lean away from wanting to utilize those supports out of fear of the unknown. But once individuals, families, communities understand the role better, understand the capabilities better, and what our mission is, it's much more well received. And so it is going to grow. There are going to be more clinicians, social service, you know, social workers in departments. You're going to see it more and more often. It's unfortunate when some people make opinions and put forward different political ideas with a misunderstanding of what certain things are. And I know that NASW has very mixed feelings about police social workers, and that breaks my heart, right, as a social worker. But it's part of my job to advocate and to you know, push forward again what great things we can do. Do I think that there have been unfortunate things that have happened with police officers that have made horrible decisions, horrible calls, didn't have the education, resources, training, etc., that has led to horrible outcomes? Absolutely. And that's going to happen when you give the responsibility that you give to officers. The community, the amount of responsibility a police officer has is monumental. It's absolutely uncomparable. People say, oh, police and fire are the same. They are not. You have someone that you trust with a certain amount of training to go out into the community to keep you safe with a weapon, right? With lethal force. And so when you give someone that responsibility and you don't provide the training, education, manpower, things like that, things are going to go wrong. And so I want to be very clear of the fact of I don't condone, as a social worker and as an individual, when people make those choices. I do condone the work of police in general, and I support our law enforcement because I have literally seen law enforcement save people's lives. Today, I literally watched a video of one of our officers on Saturday night pulling a woman off the ledge of the parking deck that wanted to kill herself, like literally yanked her down as she was trying to fall over. That is not a malicious act. That is life-saving. It's beautiful. It's a value of life. And you know, I want to celebrate that more. So, you know, I want to be very clear of the fact that we can find a very beautiful relationship with law enforcement when everyone is educated well enough, but on both sides, not just, you know, law enforcement has to own up and learn and grow. But given that opportunity, it's a very beautiful relationship. And right now with the workforce crisis that we have, and we don't have enough social workers and clinicians, and we can ever have, the responsibility of mental health is falling on law enforcement. So we need to be able to support them the best we can, because that's our reality and there's no getting away from that. So that was a very long-winded way to say, yes, I feel valued. But I love conversations like this because I want people to understand better what we do and what we're capable of doing. Because it really can be a hugely impactful relationship and partnership.
Yeah, thank you for that honest and passionate response, because I feel like a lot of us actually, like even within the social work field, don't actually know what it looks like in a police department. And the media paints one picture, right? And then the reality paints a different picture. And then, that there's just so much going on in the world right now. And it's hard to decipher, okay, what is this person doing? How is their role, impacting this, whatever. And so I agree that this conversation is really important, and continued conversations, both in the graduate school level, but with kids, with adults, everyone, the community, that understand the interconnection that social work can have with police, and the importance that it does serve. And the last question, I know we're kind of running on time, but last question I had just was, what do you see as the future for your field, and where would you like to see it go?
So I think that's a hard one. I'm going to tack on really quick to what you just said. If people do have questions about what law enforcement does, please feel free to do a ride. I know my guys would all roll their eyes at me so much for saying this, but do a ride along.
Yes.
Meet your local department.
Yes.
Go get in a car for a shift. See what's happening in your town. See what's happening around. Get to every police department allows ride. They may not right now for COVID, but generally police departments allow ride alongs. You just have to be over 18 and can't have any warrants. But otherwise, come and do a ride along. See what happens. If your police department has a social worker, reach out to them. 9 times out of 10, we all want to share what we do because we don't do what people think we do. Right. We have full-fledged jobs and had them prior to than 2 years ago. So we're not here to babysit our officers. We have full-time jobs that are not babysitting them. I don't have time for that. So as to where I see the future of the field of police social work, I think it'll continue to grow. I think it's going to become commonplace. I think that there is going to be some people who get into the field for the wrong reasons right now. And I think that is going to have a lot of growing pains. And I think that it's going to muddy the waters of police social work for a while. But I do think that there are those of us who want to be in it to do the work. And I think that that's what will come through. But I do see it growing. I think there will be a boom short term, but I do think there will be long-term growth as well.
Yeah, I agree. I do think there's a lot of legislation right now that puts into question what our roles are going to look like. And ultimately, I think it's only going to enhance. Right now, it's a pain because we're working a lot with policy and legislators, and it's some of the language is very frustrating and just like policy always is. But I think it's only going to enhance our capabilities and the promotion of this relationship. I think there's going to be more co-responding models and things like that, like I'm doing, of being in the car with an officer, responding to crisis intervention in the moment, because that's going to be needed. So I feel like it's going to grow. And I agree with Meg, learn more. Even if you have a humongous, a thought you can't stand law enforcement for whatever reason, don't let that shut you down. Let that be an opportunity to grow and learn more about it. And I'm not saying that you have to love law enforcement. What I'm saying is that a lot of the times with social work, you're going to come across it at some point. You're going to be working with them, and whether or not it's you have to do an involuntary petition for hospitalization, or there's a crisis that's happening in your clinic, or something terrible happens and they have to respond, is we have to realize how to work together. And it's on all of us. So, I do think you're going to see this more and more. We love questions. We love people reaching out and asking us. So any time we can help, anytime we can clarify things, I'm going to speak for Meg. We want to do that. So, we're huge advocates in this field. And so we're going to take the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I want to thank you both so much for having this conversation with me and allowing me to share it with my classmates and everything. And I definitely hope we can keep these conversations going and continue to evolve what does social work mean, and especially with it when it comes with law enforcement, because we do engage with it, like you said, in a variety of different fields. I've had to work with law enforcement within the school setting, and so it just is a reality of how our society is structured, and they have a role, and we have to figure out how we can coexist, however you want to put it. So
Exactly.
but thank you again so much, and I hope you I'm going to